Thank you very much, Live First there in Seoul. Now, the Olympics have brought the Koreas closer, as we have been witnessing, but how will any of the key players get past this nuclear stalemate? Bruce Klingner is the former CIA Deputy Division Chief for Korea. He's also with the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation. He is coming to us now from CNN Washington. Bruce, it is always good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of these signals coming now from North Korea that it is willing now to talk with the United States? Was this part of the strategy all along to warm up relations with South Korea, use it as a channel to get some diplomacy from the U.S.?
Right. They always focus on sort of the weak link in the chain. And right now, President Moon seems to be the most eager for engagement with fewer conditionality requirements than either the U.S. or Japan. If North Korea, though, was so eager for engagement, then they shouldn't have turned down the meeting that was agreed to with Vice President Pence. And, you know, U.S. diplomats will tell you over the years that they've frequently tried to reach out to counterparts, and it was Pyongyang which always rejected an open-handed dialogue. They closed the New York channel until reopening it to return the comatose and dying Otto Warmbier. They only recently agreed to finally pick up the phone, literally, at the military hotlines in the Joint Security Area in the West Sea. So, you know, I think we can be rightly skeptical that this really reflects any kind of change in policy by the North.
Yeah, I guess you will believe it when we see it actually happen. And the White House statement was interesting because it said, you know, we will see if Pyongyang's message today that is willing to hold talks represents the first steps along the path to denuclearization. And we know for North Korea, this precondition of agreeing to denuclearize was a non-starter. Is this something that the White House is saying, look, if you want to talk, are they continuing to hold on to this precondition, you must denuclearize first?
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion when we talk about talks. Really, it's two different levels. One is simply a conversation between diplomats meeting with counterparts, and the other is talks in the sense of negotiations, such as the six-party talks. So the former has always had a lower bar for getting over, you know, before there would be agreement on it. And the latter is certainly, you know, the U.S. doesn't want to walk into a negotiating room as long as North Korea says it will never, ever abide by the basic premise, which is denuclearizing the North. So the U.S. diplomats will tell you in this administration and previous administrations that, you know, they've always been willing to have face-to-face dialogue with their counterparts, but the North has not been receptive. So I think there's been a lot of conflicting messages coming out of the Trump administration, seeming to contradiction of each other. So I think right now, at least, there's a greater willingness to have these diplomatic discussions and at least a more clear signaling that the U.S. is willing to do that. And I think the U.S. sees that the ball is really in North Korea's court.
Yeah, and that's the message it's definitely sending. And I was just mentioning with Ivan Watson, who was in Seoul just a few minutes ago, that on Friday, the U.S. announced sanctions against North Korea, 27 shipping and trading companies, 28 vessels either registered or flagged in several countries, including North Korea, China, Singapore, etc. You don't think these sanctions go far enough? What kind of sanctions would you like to see instead?
Right. Well, the administration is hyping them as the biggest set of sanctions, and numerically they are, because they include a lot of ships. But what the U.S. is continuing to do is pulling its punches by not going after Chinese financial institutions and banks that are facilitating North Korea's nuclear missile program. So, you know, this administration, like the previous one, is talking tough, but it's not maximum pressure unless you go after these Chinese banks, which are violating U.S. law by coming into the U.S. financial system and committing crimes such as money laundering.
Yeah, and speaking of talking tough, President Trump said during that briefing Friday that if these sanctions don't work, then they're going to have to go to phase 2, whatever, you know, that means. We'll just have to figure out as the time moves on. Bruce Klingner, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much.